Build Your Business listeners. This is Matt Reynolds, your host for the podcast, and you are listening to what we are calling the legacy episodes. And really, these are the pre-episodes that really led to this podcast, the Build Your Business podcast. This is really my life's work and my brother's life's work in building your business. And so they were originally published in the Barbell Logic podcast as part of the Principles or Coaching Success series, but really touch on similar topics to the Build Your Business podcast: how to improve your productivity, how to set and accomplish your goals, deprioritize urgent tasks, to focus on what is most important to you, and most importantly, to become a better person and leader and business owner overall. I'm proud to bring you these podcasts. Again, many years of life's work, several years of podcasts, and several decades of business ownership. Hope you enjoy them and learn from them. You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship.
Welcome to the Barbell Logic Podcast. This is the Sunday Principles edition. I'm Chris Reynolds, and today I thought it would be good to talk a bit about the pursuit of wisdom. The word wisdom is not used as frequently as it once was. In fact, many of us likely recall last hearing the word in Sunday school while being taught about King Solomon. But for our purposes today, wisdom will have a practical and pragmatic meaning. Wisdom is the ability to apply knowledge. This relationship between knowledge and wisdom is often the point of some confusion, so I'm going to try to clear it up a little bit. You can't be wise without knowledge, but you can have loads of knowledge and be terribly unwise. We all know a few bookish types that seem to have all the facts. They may dominate everyone else in Trivial Pursuit, for example, but their lives are an unmitigated disaster of terrible decisions that have led them into misery. These people may be extremely smart, but they are not wise. So how do we become wise? Well, let's start by understanding that it is not possible to become wise quickly. A get wise quick scheme will have the same outcome as its cousin, the get rich quick scheme. Charlie Munger has said, "In my whole life, I have known no wise people over a broad subject matter area who didn't read all the time. None. Zero." And I have to agree with Charlie on that. However, I might be a bit broader and use the term learn rather than read, as Charlie is 96 years old, and for most of his life, nearly all self-education was in the form of books. Now we have many more ways to become learning machines. So our first step in becoming wise is to learn all the time, constantly. What then? Well, once we've acquired some knowledge from books, podcasts, online courses, or whatever, we need to put that knowledge to use. It's what happens after we've gained some knowledge that makes all the difference in our pursuit of wisdom. I can't say this better than William Deresiewicz did in his speech, Solitude and Leadership at West Point in 2009. So here I'll quote him. Quote, "I find for myself that my first thought is never my best thought. My first thought is always someone else's. It's always what I've already heard about the subject, always the conventional wisdom. It's only by concentrating, sticking to the question, being patient, letting all the parts of my mind come into play, that I arrive at an original idea. By giving my brain a chance to make associations, draw connections, take me by surprise. And often, even that idea doesn't turn out to be very good. I need time to think about it too, to make mistakes and recognize them, to make false starts and correct them, to outlast my impulses, to defeat my desire to declare the job done and move on to the next thing." End quote. This is the part that is most frequently missed, even by people who do read constantly and are genuinely trying to become wise. It isn't enough to learn the facts. It isn't enough to know the conventional wisdom, as Deresiewicz puts it. No, you need to use what you learn. And when you use it, you will inevitably fail and make mistakes. Not only is this okay, it's ideal, because it's in the mistakes and the errors that we uncover the gaps in our knowledge, and maybe even the gaps in someone else's knowledge, like the author. The Nobel laureate and famed professor Richard Feynman had a very simple but effective technique for uncovering his own knowledge gaps. He would simply pull out a blank sheet of paper and write the subject at the top. From there, he would write as concisely as possible all the main ideas of that topic, as though he were going to teach it to someone else. Frequently, he would hit a spot where he had to write a question mark because he wasn't clear on it. Once he was done with this exercise, which only takes a few minutes, he could go back to the source material and fill in the gaps of his understanding. The question marks were the whole point. Feynman wasn't trying to write on a blank sheet of paper so that everyone knew how smart he was. It was telling for me to watch my own children try this method. I really enjoy seeing the way my kids respond to various things because it usually uncovers certain tendencies that we, as adults, have as well, but over the course of time, we've learned to cover up. The first time my children tried the Feynman technique, it was painfully difficult to get them to write a question mark, to admit that there were things they didn't know. Our desire to see ourselves as smart runs so deep that it often keeps us from becoming so. You should try this for yourself. Sit down with a blank sheet of paper and try out the Feynman technique on some topic that interests you. And as you do it, notice the strong tendency to prove what you know rather than discover what you don't. As we pursue wisdom, what emerges is a group of mental models of the way the world works around us. As we accumulate mental models, we quickly learn that the models relate to each other and eventually form what Charlie Munger calls a latticework. For those unfamiliar with the term, a latticework is a crisscrossed pattern of strips of wood or metal that usually form a grid or a weave. And this is where the real wisdom begins to take root. As we build our own latticework of mental models, we begin seeing how they can be applied in all sorts of areas of our own lives. When they work, they are reinforced as valuable to us, and when they don't, we enter a virtuous cycle of modifying and improving the model, or in some cases, disposing of it entirely. But that's the beauty of it. Finding out that a certain mental model doesn't work also makes you wiser. Disposing a mental model is not shameful. It does not illustrate that you are inept. Instead, think of disposing mental models as reclassifying the model as a source of human misjudgment. And understanding where humans tend to make mistakes is incredibly valuable, especially if you mentor others. There's one more aspect of pursuing wisdom that I'd like to discuss, and that's the idea of earned self-confidence. Being confident in yourself is usually thought of as a very good trait. However, I'll argue that unearned self-confidence is not only a bad trait, it is possibly the greatest obstacle to personal growth. What we are after is earned self-confidence, which can be thought of as confidence we have in ourselves due to the work that we've done to build expertise in some area. And no area is more important to our self-confidence than wisdom. When you have done the work, you've read the books, tested your knowledge, put it to work in your life, and built a sturdy latticework of mental models, you'll find that something interesting emerges over time, a deep form of self-confidence. This is the kind of self-confidence that allows you to vocally disagree with the prevalent consensus of your peers without fear of being an actual fool. You don't have to look very hard in the age of social media to find the staunch opinion of fools. But those aren't the people that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people you respect, brilliant people, people you look up to. Guess what? Those people are wrong sometimes too, because they are just people. We're all wrong sometimes. So do yourself a favor starting today. Make a commitment to go to bed a little wiser than when you woke up. Read a book, take an online course, watch a documentary, then sit down and test your knowledge with a blank sheet of white paper using the Feynman technique. Fill in the gaps, then put your knowledge to work in the real world. Fail several times and keep going. Consider writing down the mental models that you discover as you build your own unique latticework. This has been another edition of the Barbell Logic Podcast Principles Series. We'll see you next week.